The rain had just begun to fall when Ethan Ward's private jet touched down on the slick runway outside the city. The world still thought he was in Singapore finalizing a merger, but after 48 sleepless hours and a growing sense of unease he couldn't explain, he decided to come home early. His chauffeur, startled to see him, scrambled to open the car door. Ethan waved him off. "I'll drive myself," he said, his voice low, tired, but resolute. He wanted no one to know he was back. The winding road up to the Ward estate was wrapped in fog, the mansion perched like a shadow on the hill. Normally, all lights would be off by this hour, Clara, the maid, always locked up before midnight. But as Ethan cut the engine and stepped out into the wet silence, he noticed a faint amber glow flickering behind the living room curtains. His brow furrowed. The clock on his dashboard read 12:43 a.m. He slipped his key into the door, turning it quietly. The familiar scent of polished oak and lavender cleaner filled his lungs. Every sound was magnified. The slow drip from his coat onto the marble floor, the distant tick of the grandfather clock. Then he heard it, a voice. A whisper. A man's voice. Ethan froze. His hand tightened on the briefcase still in his grip. He'd expected solitude, not conversation. The voice came again, low and hurried, from deeper in the house. He stepped out of his shoes, moving soundlessly past the foyer and down the corridor toward the study. As he neared, a figure emerged from the shadows, the maid, Clara. She looked startled to see him, her face pale beneath the soft light of the hallway lamp. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she raised her trembling hand, pressing a finger to her lips. "Please, Mr. Ward," she whispered, barely audible. "Stay silent." Ethan's confusion deepened. He opened his mouth to ask what was happening, but her eyes pleaded with him, fearful, desperate, almost pleading for his trust. She stepped closer, her voice a hush of breath. "He's still here," she said, eyes darting toward the study. Ethan followed her gaze. Through the slight crack in the door, he caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow shifting near his desk, a faint glint of metal. His pulse quickened. A burglar, or something worse. He glanced at Clara again. She shook her head subtly, signaling him to wait. The clock struck 1, the chime echoing through the hallway like a warning. Ethan could feel the tension building between them, an invisible thread stretched taut. Clara's hand brushed his sleeve lightly, steadying him, grounding him. Her whisper came again, softer this time, trembling but firm. "Please trust me, sir. Don't make a sound." For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan obeyed. The billionaire who commanded boardrooms and global markets stood frozen in his own home, listening to the sounds of betrayal, or danger, just beyond a wooden door. From inside, the faint click of a drawer opening reached them. Papers shuffled, and then the unmistakable hum of a device powering on. Clara's eyes widened. She mouthed one word to him. "Recording." Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his chest. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like a pulse. He didn't yet know who was in that room, or what they were after, but one thing was certain. Clara wasn't just a maid caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Something much deeper was unfolding, and it had just begun. Ethan held his breath, his heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo through the hallway. Clara's eyes darted toward the study door again, signaling for him to stay hidden. The faint crack between the door and frame revealed only a sliver of light, but through it, he could see the outline of a man moving around his desk. Ethan leaned slightly forward, straining to hear, while Clara remained completely still beside him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. Inside, the intruder's movements were deliberate, no panic, no hurry. Whoever he was, he knew his way around. The realization hit Ethan like a cold blade. Few people outside his immediate circle even knew where he kept his confidential files. The room was filled with the faint hum of electronics and the rustle of paper. A click, a pause, then the sound of a drawer sliding open. Clara turned her head slightly, whispering so faintly that Ethan could barely catch the words. "He came an hour ago. Said you sent him. I didn't believe him." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "Then I saw what he was doing." Ethan's jaw tightened. The only light in the corridor came from the antique wall sconce, flickering weakly against the damp air. He could see the fear etched in Clara's face, but beneath it was something else, resolve. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. She'd been watching, waiting, protecting something. From inside the study, a familiar voice spoke, low and distinct. "Come on. Where did you hide it, Ward?" The voice sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He knew it instantly. Victor Hale, his business partner of nearly 10 years. The man he'd built an empire with. Victor's tone was bitter, impatient. Papers shuffled again, and then the sound of glass clinking, perhaps the whiskey decanter from the side table. Ethan could almost see him now, pacing, searching, muttering under his breath. Clara's eyes met his. "He's been coming here after hours. I didn't know what he wanted until tonight. I was going to call the police, but..." She broke off suddenly as Victor's footsteps approached the door. She grabbed Ethan's wrist, pulling him into the shadows behind a tall grandfather clock just as the door creaked open. Victor stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the golden light behind him. He scanned the hall, his sharp eyes flicking over the darkness. For a moment, Ethan was certain he'd been seen. The air was thick with the scent of rain and tension. But then Victor sighed, muttered something under his breath, and turned back into the room, shutting the door halfway. Clara exhaled shakily. "He's looking for something important," she whispered. "Something he doesn't want you to know about." Ethan's mind raced. He thought of the files he'd locked away before leaving for Singapore, the documents that detailed a new line of encryption software worth billions. If Victor had those, he could destroy Ethan's company overnight. A faint metallic click echoed again. This time, Ethan recognized it, the soft beep of a data drive being inserted into a laptop. Clara's grip on his wrist tightened. "He's copying your files," she murmured. Ethan's instinct was to storm in and confront him, but Clara shook her head violently. "No, wait, I've been recording him. I can prove what he's done." Her calm under pressure surprised him. She was terrified, yes, but she wasn't helpless. She had been planning this, quietly gathering evidence, risking everything while pretending to be invisible in his home. Then, through the thin crack of the study door, Victor spoke again, his voice darker, colder now. "Once I have this, no one will ever know the truth about Ward Technologies. Not even Ethan himself." The words burned through Ethan like acid. He had returned home early to escape suspicion and rest. Instead, he'd walked straight into betrayal. Clara turned to him, her whisper barely audible. "Now you see why I told you to stay silent," she said. "Because the truth is far worse than you think." Ethan could feel the blood roaring in his ears, each word from Victor slicing through the silence like a blade. Every instinct in him screamed to storm into the study, to grab Victor by the collar and demand an explanation. But Clara's grip on his arm was unyielding. Her eyes locked on his, steady and fierce, as if reminding him that rage would ruin everything. She tilted her head slightly, urging him to listen instead. Inside, Victor's voice dropped to a hushed murmur. "He thinks he's untouchable," he said bitterly. "All that money, all that power, and he still trusts people too easily." A short laugh followed, dry and humorless. "He'll never see it coming." Ethan's hands clenched into fists, the leather of his gloves creaking softly. Victor had been more than a partner, he had been a friend. They'd built their empire together from the ground up, shared hotel rooms, late-night ideas, even family dinners. And now he was stealing from him, worse, mocking him. The betrayal cut deep, colder than the rain hammering against the mansion's windows. Clara leaned closer. "There's a camera behind the bookshelf," she whispered. "I planted it after I caught him snooping last week. It's recording everything right now." Ethan turned his head slightly toward her, astonishment flickering across his face. "You did what?" He mouthed silently. "I had to," she breathed. "I didn't know who to trust." He was careful, always came when the staff was off. "Tonight, I told him I'd finished my shift early, but I stayed. I knew he'd come back." In that moment, Ethan saw her differently. Not as the quiet maid who drifted through rooms unnoticed, but as someone brave enough to take on a man far more dangerous than she appeared to realize. Her hands trembled faintly, yet her gaze never wavered from the door. Inside, Victor's phone buzzed. "Yes," he said after answering, his tone sharp. "I'm in. Almost done." A pause. "Don't worry, he's still in Singapore. By the time he finds out, we'll have everything transferred." Ethan's stomach twisted. There was someone else involved. Another accomplice. The air in the corridor seemed to thicken, pressing down on him. Clara's breathing was shallow. She glanced toward the security panel by the staircase, then back at Ethan. When he's finished copying the data, he'll leave through the kitchen door. I've already locked it from the outside. He won't get far. Her words hit him like a spark of strategy amid chaos. She had been planning a trap. Ethan nodded once, silently acknowledging her courage. For the first time in years, he was taking orders from someone else, and it didn't feel wrong. Victor's voice rose again, laced with satisfaction. Got it, finally. The laptop lid snapped shut. Ethan heard the faint jingle of keys and the scrape of a chair. He tensed, ready to move, but Clara stopped him once more. Wait, she mouthed. Let him incriminate himself. She slipped a small device from her pocket, a flash drive. This is his, she whispered. I switched it earlier. He's been walking around thinking he's stealing your files, but all he's getting are decoys. A mix of admiration and disbelief flickered across Ethan's face. He had underestimated her entirely. She was no ordinary maid. From the study came the sound of Victor's footsteps approaching the door again. Ethan pressed back into the shadows. The door opened, light spilling into the corridor. Victor stepped out, glancing around warily. His laptop bag hung over his shoulder, his expression smug. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought the moment was lost, that Victor would walk out, vanish into the night, and the chance for justice would slip away. But Clara moved first. She deliberately knocked over a vase, the crash echoing through the hallway. Victor froze, eyes narrowing. Who's there? Ethan straightened slowly, stepping into the light at last. His voice was low, controlled, and deadly calm. Going somewhere, Victor. The color drained from Victor's face. In that charged silence, everything changed. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was exposed, raw, and about to erupt. Victor stood frozen in the doorway, his hand still gripping the strap of his laptop bag. For a long, tense moment, the only sound in the room was the soft patter of rain against the windows and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Ethan stepped forward, his expression calm but his eyes burning with quiet fury. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Ethan, Victor finally stammered, forcing a shaky laugh. You're home early. I was just stealing from me. Ethan's tone was almost conversational, but the coldness beneath it made the words sharper than any shout. Victor's face drained of color. His gaze darted toward Clara, who stood behind Ethan, her posture rigid but her expression unreadable. She told me you wanted these files reviewed, he said quickly. You must have misunderstood. Clara stepped forward, cutting him off. I told you nothing of the sort, she said quietly. I told you to leave the house. You refused. Victor's eyes narrowed. You little. Before he could finish, Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. Don't. Not one more word. He moved closer until they stood only a few feet apart. The glow from the study lamp illuminated his face, casting hard shadows beneath his eyes. I trusted you, Victor. You built this company with me. My family let you into this home. And this is how you repay it. Victor swallowed hard, glancing around for an escape route. But Clara had already positioned herself between him and the hall. The quiet confidence in her stance made it clear she had thought of everything. I don't think you understand what's happening, Victor tried again, his voice trembling. You're making a mistake. I was protecting us, our interests. By selling our data to competitors. Ethan interrupted. He reached for the laptop bag and tore it from Victor's shoulder. You've been leaking information for months. Clara warned me. She gathered proof. He opened the bag and pulled out the laptop, setting it on the desk. Clara stepped beside him and inserted the flash drive she'd switched earlier. The screen flickered to life, and Ethan's files appeared, except they weren't the real ones. They were fake project plans and decoy contracts, all timestamped to match Victor's theft attempts. Victor's face went slack as he realized the truth. You set me up, he breathed. No, Clara said softly. You set yourself up. I just made sure you couldn't hurt him. Outside, the rumble of approaching engines broke the silence. Headlights sliced through the rain as two black SUVs rolled up the driveway. Ethan didn't turn to look. He simply said, "Security's here." Victor's panic broke through his composure. He lunged for the door, but two guards entered, blocking his escape. One of them handcuffed him without a word. As they led him away, he looked back at Ethan. "You'll regret this," he spat. Ethan didn't answer. He watched in silence as the door closed behind them. When the house finally grew quiet again, Ethan turned to Clara. She looked suddenly smaller, exhausted, the adrenaline fading from her body. He studied her for a long time, as if seeing her for the first time. "You risked everything," he said softly. "Why?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, creased and faded with age. She handed it to him. Ethan took it, his breath catching as he recognized the smiling face beside a younger Clara. His late wife. "I promised her I'd look after you," Clara said, her voice trembling now. "After the accident, I didn't want anything from you. I just wanted to keep her promise." For a long time, Ethan couldn't speak. The realization struck him harder than any betrayal. All this time, she hadn't just been a maid, she had been family. Finally, he set the photo gently on the desk and looked at her with quiet gratitude. "You didn't just save the company," he said. "You saved me." Clara smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing at last. "Then my promise is kept," she whispered. The storm outside began to ease, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something close to peace. The lies had been exposed, the danger past, but the truth had changed everything.